In 2023, President William Ruto offered Kenyans a generous serving of shock therapy through a raft of far-reaching tax measures, largely driven by a program the country has with the International Monetary Fund. The upside of these painful tax measures, President Ruto said in his Jamhuri Day speech, was that the country was able to avert a catastrophic financial crisis that has befallen countries like Ghana, Zambia, and Ethiopia. In June, the members of the National Assembly acrimoniously passed the Finance Act 2023 with the Kenya Kwanza administration seeking to raise an additional 211 billion shillings from the tax measures as it sought to fund an expanded budget owing to elevated debt service costs. At this point, from Nairobi, Kenya, Professor Exen Iraki joins me. He's an economist, University of Nairobi, and he'll be talking to us on this. Thank you so much, Professor Iraki, for talking to us.
Good morning. Good morning. How are you?
I'm fine. We're good. Now, in 2023, Kenya, under President William Ruto, witnessed a year of taxes, fines, and fees. And of course, we understand that the grand plan was to avoid the disastrous fate that befell other African countries through tight reforms. But then, what's your assessment of these measures? What have these measures achieved, and how have they affected Kenyans?
You know, Kenya is a very dramatic country, in my opinion, because during the era of Uhuru Kenyatta, everybody complained about debt, that Uhuru Kenyatta was getting too much debt for the country. So when they voted in President Ruto, then the argument was, if you don't want debt, then pay taxes. So it's very, very interesting that the people who complain about debt are the same people complaining about taxes. So what has happened is that President Ruto's government has come up with a lot of new taxes and increased some taxes. And later he has come up with a very interesting argument that we are taxing you to make sure that Kenya does not default. And curiously, in today's Kenyan newspapers, there's a story about Ethiopia defaulting. So from a monetary point of view, the argument by the president is very convincing. Because if we default on boards or other government obligations, then the consequence will be very disastrous. But by trying not to default on our foreign debts, there has been unintended consequences. Because higher taxes means less profit for a lot of businesses. So a lot of businesses have closed or are suffering because they cannot make ends meet. And the people are arguing that because of high taxes, then we are going to have more people being unemployed. We are going to get less business growth. Because the economists always tell you that one way to stimulate the economy is to make sure that you have lower taxes, so that people have more money in their pockets. There's more demand for goods and services, and that creates jobs. So it is not, the jury is not yet out about the real consequences of higher tax prices or higher tax rates. But if we can avoid defaulting, on our boards, on our debts, then I think that will be a plus for President Ruto.
Well, just to corroborate what you said earlier, when we look through these reforms, we see that fuel prices surged as excise duties were adjusted, squeezing on household budgets, and transportation costs also characterized what happened in Kenya. And even if you look at small everyday transactions, they were also impacted with a raft of levies. So I'm asking you, Professor Iraki, was the pain worth it, considering the fact that a number of citizens and businesses grossly were affected? Some people lost their jobs, and there were protests sometime this year. So was the pain worth it? Was the sacrifice worth it?
That's an interesting question, because if you ask anyone on the streets, any businessman, any employed person in Kenya, he'll tell you that they have suffered because they have less money to take care of their interests, to pay rent, to pay for school fees, to pay for food, to pay for other services. So in the short run, everybody has suffered. But the argument by the government is this is a sacrifice that is worth making so that the country can stabilize economically and you have better economic growth prospects in future. So, but if you ask any ordinary person, it's not worth it. But the government says it is worth the sacrifice. So I think what we need to do is to give the government maybe 2-3 years. We see how the economy improves, and then we can say this was a good decision or not good decision. But from the popular person, from the person on the streets, it's not a good decision. From the government, it's a good decision. So let's keep time and see who was right between the citizens and the government.
Well, there's a twist to it anyway. While the government celebrated averted economic meltdown, some Kenyans were not too convinced. In public discourse, there was a buzz with discontent, with critics alleging that the burden was unfairly placed on ordinary citizens, while corporations and the wealthy seemed to have escaped unscathed. So was there a balance between what the price that is being paid by the rich and what the poor had to pay for in terms of the sacrifices and, of course, what had to happen in the country?
There has been the quintessential debate in Kenya on whether the tax burden is fairly or equally shared. So if you look at some of the big taxes that have come up, some of the levies that have come up, they are targeting people who are employed, the housing levy and other levies. So people are feeling that if you are employed, you are sharing disproportionate share of the tax compared with the people who are unemployed. And the government has said, wait a minute, why don't we also extend the tax bracket to the people who are self-employed, the small and medium enterprises? And that's why the government came up with things like turnover tax from 1% to 3%. But even if you are self-employed, you have to pay a bit of tax. And the argument in Kenya has been, if we all pay taxes, if the tax bracket was widened, then we would share the tax burden more equitably and to be less for everybody. But for now, the feeling is that if you're employed, if you're formerly employed, then you are probably suffering more than those people who are not employed. At the end of the day, if you're self-employed, you just increase the price of goods and services that you sell. But if you're employed and you are given more, or there's more tax imposed on you, your salary will go up immediately. So there's a feeling that the new tax measures might be good in the long run, but not everybody is sharing the same burden.
Now, questions have also been raised, Professor Iraki, about the effectiveness of the tax measures, with some pointing to a rise in the formal and the informal economy as people sought to actually avoid official squeeze. So was Kenya's tax system more improved and robust under William Ruto? Because some people said that it should have instead widened the tax net rather than double on taxes that citizens and corporations and businesses were meant to pay.
So that has been the argument that a lot of people have been raising here, economists and other people, that one way to make sure that the tax burden is shared is to have everybody paying taxes, whether you're self-employed, whether you're formerly employed, whether you're a businessman, big or small, everybody should pay his due taxes. And the argument has been, if you pay taxes, the tax revenues will go up. The government will have less appetite for money because the money is there. And at the same time, the government will probably borrow less because it is able to take care of its obligations using taxes. So if we can expand the tax bracket, I think that would be the best option. But the question has always been, people are asking this simple question. We are going to pay taxes. We are going to pay more taxes, newer taxes. But are we going to get good returns for our taxes? So one of the ways to make sure that people pay more taxes more willingly is to show where that tax is going. There has been a lot of complaint from a lot of Kenyans that a lot of that tax goes to paying recurrent expenditure, salaries and wages, whether it's at the national level or at the county level. And that means that even if you get more taxes, the effect is not easily seen. So we need more money to go to development so that we make the economy more productive, more efficient, and we make it easier to create jobs and have more people employed, and people see the benefits of these taxes that are collected from us.
People have actually also said that in as much as the citizens would need to be subjected into paying improved tax on services and businesses, they said that within the year that the margin should have been minimal and affordable. Now, this is why I'm saying this. There was the introduction of 1.5% housing levy paid by salaried employees. And of course, that also matched with the employers anyway. There was a doubling of value-added tax on petroleum products to about 16%, and the increase on the cost of sending money through mobile phones. There was also the issue around what is to be paid by employers. Petitioners wanted the president to increase the tax cap to about just 20% for worker salaries. But then the president increased it to about between 32.2% and 35% for workers earning 500,000 shillings and 800,000 shillings. So when you now look at what people had to pay, whether in the formal or in the informal sector, the margin compared to what they were paying before, don't you think that it could have been just a gradual process rather than that astronomical spike?
See, that is the argument. People have been arguing that we probably should have distributed these taxes over the years so that there's an increase in tax this year, next year, and so on, so that people are able to bear the burden of those taxes. So I totally agree with you that the sudden increase was not commensurate with the income that people make. Remember that by the time you bring the housing levy, by the time you bring the turnover tax and other taxes, the business are not improved substantially for you to be able to make more money, bring that tax. Remember, you pay taxes on the money that you make. So I think there's no question about it that maybe these taxes should have been distributed over time, maybe over 2 years or 3 years, so that people don't feel the effect as they are feeling now. But the argument was the economy was in dire straits and we needed to come up with a very quick solution. But I totally agree with you that maybe this tax should have been distributed by years so that we have more money in the pocket. People demand services and goods because they have money in the pocket, and that would have stimulated the economy. All economists will tell you that one way to stimulate the economy is to cut taxes so that people have more money in their pockets, there's demand for goods and services, and jobs are created, the economy expands. Tax cuts have always been economic stimulus.
Just in about a minute, Professor Iraki, I just wanted to quickly find out, aside taxes, are there other areas where you think that the government should have focused on? We know that Kenya has natural resources, has minerals and other potentials. Do you think it should have also focused on those areas to bring parity in terms of revenue mobilization?
I think the question has always been is how do you raise your tax, how do you raise your revenues of the government? You can use taxes, you can use debt, you can borrow some money, but the other way to do it is to bring down the government expenditure so that we live within the means. And the other way is to make sure the economy expands. And one way to expand the economy is to go to new sectors like mining. We have some petroleum in this country, which I think we should exploit. We have other minerals that are lying underground. So we can focus on that, maybe exploit our farmland so that we have more food to export. And you know very well that once there is more food, which is a very big determinant of inflation goes down. So I think the issue of taxation should be multifaceted. We should look at all the areas we can get more taxes. We can also make sure that we get more foreign direct investments, that more people invest here, business expand, and we have more people paying taxes. So I think the issue of tax, the issue of debt should be looked at from a very longer perspective, wider perspective, not just about the taxes that you and me pay.
Professor Iraki, economist, University of Nairobi, thank you so much for your contribution.
Thank you and happy holidays.
And you too. As Kenyans gear up for a new year, the fiscal hangover of 2023 lingers, no doubt, but it remains to be seen whether the austerity measures will truly deliver the promised economic turnaround for the country, or if the pain, those reforms, of course, will overshadow any long-term benefits. Regardless, 2023 would be remembered as the year Kenyans tightened their belts, hoping their sacrifices would pave the way for a brighter future. Thank you so much for joining us on today's edition of Business Edge. Don't forget to follow us on social media at News Central TV is the handle. You can visit our website at www.newscentral.africa and equally download our mobile app on App Store and Play Store. See you some other time. I am Lekon Obanjo. Do not go away anyway. The news will come your way at the top of the hour.